So, the second topic that we're going to discuss is how our social institutions evolve. There are actually three stages of development as proposed by Lewis Henry Morgan. So, these are what we call savage stage or savagery. We have the barbaric stage or the barbarism, and then the last one we have the civilized stage, or we have also what we call it a civilization. The very first stage that we're going to discuss is we have what we call the savage stage. This is considered to be the lowest stage of development and is exemplified by the nomadic and hunter-gatherer lifestyle. Now, if we're going to compare it on the previous discussion, savage stage is actually the counterpart of the hunting and gathering lifestyle community. The second stage, as proposed by Lewis Henry Morgan, is we have what we call the barbaric stage. This is considered to be the middle stage of development, where people began learning agricultural techniques and domestication of animals. Comparing it to our previous discussion with the evolution of society, the barbaric stage is actually the counterpart of horticultural and pastoral society, at the same time, the agricultural society. Last one is we have the civilized stage. This is considered to be the highest stage of development where people learned writing. So if we're going to compare this on the previous discussion on the evolution of our society, civilized stage is the counterpart of the industrial and the post-industrialist society. So again, let's take a quick review. The three types of development or stages of development as proposed by Lewis Henry Morgan. We have the savage stage, the barbaric stage, and the last one is the civilized stage. There are actually different ideas that emerge about how social institutions evolve or how social institutions developed over time. So the first one is we have Frederick Engels. Now, he used Morgan studies in developing a theory on the origin of private property and state. So basically, you need to remember that if we talk about Frederick Engels, especially on the evolution of social institutions, he focuses on the production of wealth and private property. According to Frederick Engels, he postulated that the accumulation of private property paved the way for the collapse of the primitive communities and the establishment of a class-based societies. So Frederick Engels then collaborated with Karl Marx and came up with a perspective that social institutions evolved primarily due to the struggle between social classes over the means of production such as wealth and private property. The idea of Frederick Engels explains that before there was actually no accumulation of wealth. So basically, people have the same wealth. Okay, they don't actually accumulate wealth and private property. But the moment people started to accumulate this wealth, private properties, that was also the start that there is already this distinction between social classes, wherein we already have what we call the rich and the poor, the people whom what we call are as the bourgeoisie or the elite people, and also the people who also what we call as the proletariat or the laborers, because of the idea started when people collected this wealth and private property. Aside from Frederick Engels, we also have another proponent whom what we call Herbert Spencer. Now, he applied Charles Darwin's principles of biological evolution to social evolution. So, according to Herbert Spencer, individual members within societies engage in a competition for survival, whereby the superior ones dominate those who are inferior. Now, this idea was actually seen as a justification of imperialism. So, again, for Herbert Spencer, he believes that we humans within a society, we try to survive, we try to win this certain competition for survival. Now, as you can see also during this pandemic, people will try to devise ways in order for us to survive this pandemic. Now, what is imperialism? Now, imperialism is the idea of extending power from one territory to the other. So usually within an empire, it is actually led by what we call an emperor. So if you are a fan of watching Korean dramas, diba, there are actually some scenes that most of them would try to conquer another empire. And that actually, we can consider that as an idea of imperialism, wherein if you are the much more superior empire, you try to dominate those who are inferior. So again, for this class, we need to understand also what we call cultural relativism. So again, this certain perspective believes that societies cannot be classified according to definite stages of development, and that one society cannot claim to be more advanced than other societies. So again, class, you can never say that okay, this certain society is already on the civilized stage, or this certain society would always remain on the savage stage, because again, each society, they are unique, okay, or each society, they have their own capacity, they have their own context. Okay, so we can never say that this society is much more advanced compared to the others. Now, again, each society and culture must be analyzed and evaluated according to its own specific content and the influence of outside factors. So we can never say that the Filipino culture or the Filipino society is actually more advanced compared to, say, for example, Nigerian society. Okay, so we can never compare those because it's just like comparing an apple to an orange. We need to understand that the concept of cultural relativism is that there is what we call an individual's abilities, beliefs, and ideas that are based on the cultural context of his or her society. The idea of cultural relativism was mainly proposed by Franz Boas. So basically, he believed that you don't need to proceed a stage in order for you to reach to the highest stage. Okay, you don't need to undergo savage stage in order for you to become civilized, because it is actually possible that with the development of society, because of the adaptation of the society, it could be that maybe from a savage stage, you can just directly proceed to the civilized stage. And he also argued that the human behavior is not rooted in biology but is socially constructed, meaning that doesn't mean that if your family is a family of killers, automatically you will also be a killer. Or like if parents your parents are cheaters, that doesn't automatically mean that you will also cheat. It will actually be based on how you were brought up, how you actually learn from your society. One example of this is that even if your parents are, say, for example, cheaters, okay, that doesn't hold true that you will automatically be a cheater. But the possibility of you being a cheater is there if and if you get to see this, you get to frequently see this and adapt to this. There's a higher possibility that you can have, or you can imitate this. Franz Boas' idea that our behavior is not rooted in biology but is socially constructed is greatly opposed by this what we call kung ano ang puno, siya ang bunga. So, Franz Boas will never believe this kung ano ang puno, siya ang bunga if we're going to look at his perspective. So for this topic, there are actually two different ideas with regards to the origins of social and political institutions. So again, the very first one, according to Morgan and Ingalls, we undergo what we call stages of development. So meaning we cannot be civilized unless otherwise we underwent savage stage and the barbaric stage. However, this is opposed by the idea of Franz Boas because of what we call his cultural relativism, okay, that one stage does not necessarily precede or lead to another stage. Right? It is possible that you can be civilized even if you never underwent with the barbaric stage or the savage stage.